Welcome to the Media Leader Podcast. I'm Jack Benjamin. The BBC is at a critical moment as it looks to negotiate with the government over the renewal of its charter. This month, it published its response to the government's consultation on the matter, in which it highlighted the, quote, need for radical reforms to its independence. Preserving the status quo, the corporation argued, will, quote, not be enough to deliver a BBC that remains recognizable to audiences, nor brings benefits to UK society and beyond, end quote. Chiefly, the current funding model, quote, cannot maintain the BBC's public service mission for the future, they argued. The corporation is indeed facing a number of headwinds. It is losing an estimated £1 billion per year in potential license fee revenue as people evade required payments or forego TV ownership. A lack of funding has necessitated controversial cuts in recent years to a number of BBC services, most notably the World Service, which has seen a 21% drop in budget since 2021. It all comes as the Beeb is looking to hire a replacement for outgoing Director General Tim Davie. The aptly named Matt Britton, spelled Brittin, who led Google's EMEA business for a decade, has been tightly linked to the opening. Amid it all, the Media Leader hosted the 15th annual Connected TV World Summit in London last week to discuss the future of TV business and TV technology. At the event, it was my pleasure to sit down with Kerensa Samanidis, the general manager of BBC iPlayer. We spoke about the challenges faced by the BBC as it seeks to compete with global streaming giants, whether the BBC would look to partner with other public service broadcasters on distribution efforts, and the importance of producing distinctly British content for British audiences. This is our conversation. I hope you enjoy.
Morning, everyone.
Morning.
Kerensa, it's great to have you here. Thanks so much for being here. I had a whole plan for this conversation, and then over the weekend, the Financial Times reported that as part of reforming the license fee, the BBC wants to maybe open up iPlayer to other public service broadcasters like ITV and Channel 4. So I just thought I would start there in terms of what do you know about the pitch and what you might think the immediate future might hold for that.
Sure. I mean, there's not a huge amount that I can say at this point in time because I think a lot of what that means is still being worked out as part of BBC's charter renewal conversations. So that was shared as part of the BBC's response to the government green paper. And I think ultimately what it means is that we need to be open to evolving how we work, given how the market is changing and evolving around us. So that means in order to protect a public service ecology, then we need to be open to working more closely with other public service broadcasters. What that means in essence or in practical terms has yet to be determined. So that's about all I can really say on that, other than it will obviously change things for how we work. And it's really good news, I think.
Well, something that all the UK broadcasters have in common is their focus on uniquely British content. At the BBC, you launched the Made of Here marketing campaign. I believe that launched in September of last year.
Yeah.
Celebrates homegrown storytelling. Why do you feel it's important to communicate that to audiences?
Well, I think twofold. I mean, one, it's about reminding people of why the BBC exists and reminding everyone of the great range of programming that we create. But also, I mean, it's really important to remind people, given the fact that we are coming up to a really important charter renewal, which is likely to change things, about reminding people of why the BBC is so important to them and in their lives and of the service that it provides. So, yeah, I mean, I think it was an incredible campaign. It was really emotional, really emotive, really great to see so much great content being represented and really sort of showing how local and how regional the BBC's output is.
Speaking of local, we just heard from Richard Broughton at AMP here earlier this morning. He warned that some of the more mono-market broadcasters are in a bit of an asymmetric fight with global streaming platforms just in terms of scale. So I'm kind of curious how you view iPlayer's place in the streaming market vis-a-vis some of the global platforms, that the Netflixes and Amazon Prime Videos of the world. Sure.
I mean, obviously, I wouldn't say we directly compete with them, but for audience attention, we do. And obviously, they are, I think iPlayer's second in terms of catalogue size in the UK after Netflix. So we do, when you think about from an audience point of view, in terms of the choice that they have, we do compete with them for choice. But obviously we're driven by very different purpose and strategies and values. And obviously Netflix is a global commercial streamer. The BBC public service side is very much focused on Britain and British audiences. So, and as a public service broadcaster, we have a very different strategy and a very different consideration when we're thinking about what content we create for audiences. So I think two very fundamental differences in our strategies for which motivates what we do and how we do it. But ultimately, when it comes down to when you're sitting on your living room in front of your television and making a choice about which streaming app to open, then obviously we want to be the first to choose that people choose before Netflix.
You mentioned the funding models are obviously very distinct. Something that strikes me about Prime Video and Apple TV Plus are that Amazon and Apple use those services almost as loss leaders for the rest of their business. That's very different from having a license fee or however the BBC gets funded. Do you view that type of funding structure as restrictive or as freeing compared to some of a more commercial model?
I think it carries both restrictions and freedoms to a degree. Obviously, I've worked in international streaming, companies, and when you're thinking about multiple audiences with multiple cultures and multiple markets, then that adds a level of complexity and cost. Obviously, we're thinking about serving the needs of everyone in the UK, and that, I've always said before in previous roles that we don't need to be all things to all people, but actually with the BBC you do, in the UK particularly, obviously. So we do need to think about the needs of all British audiences, and we do that through how we commission content and also how the BBC operates and how the BBC is structured. So with news, with sport, with music, and obviously with all of our great TV content. So we obviously have a much broader range of content that we cover, but it's very, very focused on British audience needs. We're not thinking about, obviously, global needs. How
do you consider then catalogue scale? Do you think about commissioning lots of content? You mentioned sort of a diversity of content. Is it a quality play versus a quantity play?
It has to be quality. That's what we go for. But obviously, we need enough range and depth for people to service their needs so that they feel like they're getting as much as they can from their license fee. We consider license fee value as one of the prime measurements of if people are engaging with the BBC for a certain period of time each week, then we equate that to license fee value. So if people feel like they're getting enough from the BBC, they will continue to pay their license fee and feel like they're getting value for money. If we don't and people aren't engaging, then obviously we've got work to do. So part of that is down to making sure that we have enough range, depth, choice at any one time. And we do that through commissioning hopefully quality content, but obviously because we're considering the needs of every individual in the UK, that means that we have to consider a whole different range of content within that. So our budgets will never be the same as global streamers, but hopefully because of our focus and because of what we do, we give people enough choice to feel like they're really getting value from the license fee they pay.
How do you balance investing in originals versus licensing content for the platform?
The vast majority of our budget goes to commissions in the UK. So I think 80% of the 1.5 billion roughly content budget was invested in UK productions. 60% of that is outside of London, and only a fraction of the budget, of our content budget, is spent on acquisitions. It's 5% or less. But we do that tactically in order to sort of fill gaps in what we can commission ourselves. We do it really successfully as well. We do less on acquisitions than other broadcasters do.
There was a really interesting note from last week. Thinkbox had an event here in London. They shared BARB data that showed 19 of the top 20 most watched UK programs were produced here in the UK, were British produced. Anthony Jones, the head of research, said, quote, "Brits love British entertainment." How do you ensure that entertainment or news or weather, as you mentioned, all the different services the BBC has, remains prominent on the TV set moving forward?
Well, twofold. One, making sure that our apps and our services meet the needs of all audiences. So when you're actually in the app, you find content that's relevant and interesting and exciting and new and fresh for you. But also, making sure that we work really closely with all of the right partners and platforms to ensure that our apps are prominently presented. Obviously, the Media Act 2024 makes sure that there is a mandate for public service broadcasters being prominently presented within TV platforms. So that helps and supports and protects public service broadcasters. But obviously, a lot of that relies down to how we work with those platforms, how we're integrated into those platforms, and how well our content can be surfaced on those platforms as well.
Do you think something more needs to be done on due prominence, or are the relationships sort of going okay?
At the moment, there's always more that we can be done. We always want to make sure, I think it's about protecting our future, as well as obviously, given how that ecosystem is changing, given how people are accessing content, given the popularity of different types of apps and services and content on the TV, it's really important that we continue to work really closely, both with government, with Ofcom and with platforms themselves, to ensure that we're always prominent and presented in a way that, that to allow people to have easy access to our services and to know what content is available. So yeah, it's really fundamental.
It seems to be a two-way street. Netflix co-CEO Greg Peters recently told The Telegraph that the company is quote-unquote eager to play host to BBC content on its platform. I'm curious what you make of that statement. Are you working more closely with Netflix?
We've been working with Netflix for a while in terms of co-productions, and we license a limited range of content to Netflix. But having a distribution conversation with Netflix is something that is, that's new. Not something that, I can comment on at this point, because it's not something that we're actively pursuing. Obviously, our remit is to serve the needs of the British public, and being carried and distributed within a third-party service that doesn't carry the same protections and mandates as public service broadcasters would be difficult. Distributing our content via iPlayer's the way in which we can make sure that we continue to serve the needs of everyone in the UK in the most effective and efficient way. It also is the primary means by which people engage with BBC content. We can make sure that we get the balance right between entertainment and public service content like news, etc. So, it's not really for me to comment on whether that's something that would be pursued at any point in the future, but certainly for now, we're solely focused on our own services.
Gotcha. One of those services, however, YouTube was brought up certainly in January, reporting that the BBC is wanting to start, creating exclusive content for that platform. Yeah. Talk to me about that strategy and how that might affect iPlayer.
Well, I think what we've done is come up with a really smart strategy and a really smart way of working with YouTube. So obviously we acknowledge that, YouTube is a growing platform, particularly in the living room, and that a lot of audiences are on that platform. So we want to be on platforms where we can serve the needs of different audiences and where we can reach them with content and building a relationship with them on our brands. But we're doing that in a way that effectively plays to the strengths of YouTube. So we're not just looking at distributing long-form content onto YouTube as a platform. We want to really work with YouTube to understand the types of content that work well, that we're commissioning the right type of content to meet the needs of audiences on that platform. But we're also not exclusively releasing content on YouTube. We're releasing it at the same time on iPlayer or BBC Sounds. So we're making sure that we're not diluting the overall kind of purpose and depth of our own platforms by over-serving on YouTube. So we're serving both.
Do you worry at all about audience cannibalisation? It seems to be sort of the core question when you're thinking about distribution strategies beyond your own platform. Does that come up as a concern when you're sort of starting to really delve into a bigger YouTube strategy potentially?
I don't think it's about cannibalization. I think it's just about understanding how we can reach people with the right content. And that is, that's not to say that if somebody engages with BBC on YouTube that they won't come to iPlayer or Sounds or news. Ultimately, what we want to do is create a complementary proposition so that people can get a good level of engagement with the BBC with relevant, appropriate content on platforms outside of ours, but also where they can get the full experience and where it has most value to them is on our own services. So hopefully there will be a really complementary kind of additive overarching strategy that will sort of grow overall reach, engagement, brand love, etc. And that's what we're aiming for.
I guess the question is sort of how do you make sure or work to get people to go to iPlayer as the first app that they open when they click the power button on their smart TV, as opposed to first seeing content on a third-party service?
I mean, I think obviously the kind of long-form quality, high production value based content will always be on our own platforms. We're not looking at distributing that off platform, and that's where we give most value. I think where we will do more on places like YouTube will be around kids, news. Those are the kinds of things that we feel like we have more to do, particularly news. We can reach a global audience with kids. That's a really important way in which we can actually create sort of very niche specific channels for kids, but then bring them back to iPlayer to provide like a really safe environment that parents know that they can trust, and provide a much broader, richer content offer for them there. So I think that's what I mean by being very complementary, in that YouTube is not as safe as an environment for kids as iPlayer is. There are no ads on iPlayer, so hopefully that's somewhere that we can be, where we know that audiences are, but then we can bring them back to our own environments, which are kind of tailored specifically for those audiences, but in a really complementary way.
Ultimately, I agree. I think a lot of success comes down to IP, regardless of where necessarily people are finding it and watching it. But I'm curious, moving forward, you mentioned news, weather, sport. BBC has this large diversity that it shows on iPlayer. Are you concerned at all about the global players coming in and taking slices of those pies beyond sort of entertainment, drama? That tends to be what I think a lot of the streamers have invested in so far. Yeah,
I mean, obviously, now when you compare the range of genres that global streamers versus BBC have, then they double down on entertainment. So their primary genres are film, drama, comedy. Some documentary and factual, but mostly those sort of are their three primary genres that drive their output and drive their engagement. Obviously, those are really, really important to the BBC as well, but obviously we provide all of the other more public service type content, so news, documentaries, arts, music, sports, that type of thing as well. And, it would be, I think we would be doing ourselves, we wouldn't be thinking about the future if we were just sort of assuming that would always remain. We know how quickly the landscape's shifting. We can see that Netflix and other streamers are moving into the live space. So it's something that we do need to consider. But, I think that's one of the BBC's USPs and one of our strongest attributes, in that, we not only have incredible content, but we really know how to produce, we have the technology, we have the ability to really drive the best possible live experiences. Plus also in the UK, for any kind of really culturally relevant moment, whether it's an election, whether it's, a national sporting event, whether it's a regional or local sporting event, we know how to serve that. We know how to produce those things, and we know how to put it out there. And also we have that kind of brand recognition, that relevance, so that if you were to ask anyone in the UK, like, where would you go to watch the World Cup, or where would you go to watch the results of an election, the majority of people will say the BBC. So I think it's really important for us to remain to be that sort of trusted destination, but that involves really investing and protecting in what we do. So we've got lots of exciting plans coming up around the World Cup, which we're so excited about, in June next year, and we'll continue to invest in those live experiences to make sure that we do protect that as a BBC USP.
We've just got about 2 seconds left. In a sentence, Kerensa, what are you most looking forward to next year?
Well, I'm not a football fan, but I am really looking forward to the World Cup, especially because Scotland will be in it for the first time in forever, and that is saying something. It'd be nice to see them doing something well, other than rugby as well. I mean, that was amazing. So yeah, Scotland are on roll. Curling, rugby, football's next. But we have so many amazing, great shows coming out. We've got great returners next year. We've got Line of Duty coming back. We've got The City of Ours coming back. We've got so much great stuff that's coming our way. So it's going to be a really exciting year.
Okay, lots to look forward to. Kerensa, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Media Leader podcast. Our executive producer is me, Jack Benjamin. Special thanks to our production partner, TriSonic. You can find all our episodes on the podcast platform of your choice or on our website at uk.themedialeader.com. But do please remember to subscribe to be notified of our next episode. You can also subscribe to our newsletter at The Media Leader to receive daily coverage of all the biggest news stories in media and advertising. From all of us at The Media Leader, I'm Jack Benjamin. See you next time.